So hi everyone, I'm Bao Nguyen. I'm the director of Be Water, which will premiere pretty soon after this at 9 p.m. And I'm very fortunate to welcome two special guests that will be talking about Bruce, the film, and how Bruce's life connects to what's going on today. So we have Steve Aoki, we have W. Kamau Bell, and I would just love to start with everyone's personal connection with Bruce and when they first kind of fell in love with Bruce Lee. And let's start with you, Steve.
Bruce, it's an interesting one. I was really thinking about like the first time. It has to be, and like I'm kind of guessing here, but it's most likely because of just me watching television as a kid. You know, it's not like because I was young when I really liked him, and I think it was. I always go back to the fact that there just weren't that many Asian role models in the media, period. You know, I remember I loved Sho Kazugi as well. And Sho Kazugi is Japanese, so I'm like, wow, a Japanese movie star. But guess what? Sho Kazugi is a ninja. You can't even see his face. All you see is his eyes. And I never really knew what he looked like. You know, I love watching Charles Bronson, and I love watching these kind of these badasses in movies growing up. And then there's Bruce Lee. You know, that he beat Chuck Norris. He was cool. He was badass. He was like, wow. You know, at that time there was like only one that you really saw his face, that was really in the foreground. Central focus, and as I learned to love him more and more, in growing up from like being a toddler to through middle school to high school, I learned how he just transcended so many cultures, and my like white friends liked him, my black friends liked him, it doesn't matter where you came from, you admired him. And it was very rare to even think that an Asian person could be so admired by non-Asians. It's actually like it was a concept I didn't find that often outside of seeing Bruce's image and his like iconic look and people wanted to be him. It was, it like definitely lasted through all my childhood, and through college, and obviously now, being able to work with the Bruce Lee estate, and work with Shannon and do like collaborations like this T-shirt. But I mean, like for me, it encompassed such a large part of my childhood.
Yeah, I come from this kind of similar point of view where, as an Asian American boy growing up, the versions of myself that I would see on screen was like usually a sidekick or a bumbling servant, or often the villain. So definitely seeing Bruce was something awe-inspiring for me. Kamau, can you talk about your first time seeing Bruce and how he's connected with you throughout your life?
Sure. I think my first time seeing Bruce, I thought I was seeing Bruce, but I wasn't seeing Bruce. I guess I would start there because I'm of the age when like they played kung fu movies on TV on the weekends, like called Kung Fu Saturday or Black Belt Sunday, and there was a bunch of different movies that were called Bruce Lee movies, and his name was always spelled differently, and he looked somewhat different in some of them. Yeah, and Bruce Lee, I sort of just the guy we called Bruce Lee when I was a kid was like, I think that's him. I think that's the one that's him. I like him the best. And so till like video stores opened, and I went to a video store and went to the martial arts section or the action section, saw like these 4 distinct movies that said Bruce Lee on them. I'd certainly seen his image before, but I didn't separate it from other, and went, wait, is this the guy? And I sort of was like, well, I'll rent these and see what happens. And then everything shifts. And then you realize the rest of those people, as good as they are just imitating. And it's not even whether or not they kick or punch better than him, but that's the guy. And the way he does it and the way he expresses himself is way more personal and unique and pure than all the imitators. And I have a lot of respect for the imitators, but it was just very clear. It was like, accept no imitations.
Yeah, I think you saw him when he was kind of just coming out of like I guess you're a little older than us, or at least me. I saw him like in the late '80s, early '90s on TV, but you kind of saw him more in the prime right after he came out. And the tragedy is that he was big after he passed away, right? But I can't imagine like seeing that kind of growth.
But I think I saw him in like this weird sort of middle dead zone, because it wasn't the 70s. I'm not that much older than you. It was the 80s, and it was sort of this. The movies weren't accessible yet. They weren't like you could go get them everywhere. He hit sort of like his image. Shannon hadn't gotten his image back, so it was just sort of like random places.
Yeah. And
like my first Bruce Lee T-shirt was an iron-on I got in China, Chicago, and so like it was sort of like I felt like the only Bruce Lee fan in the world, sort of, because I didn't have a lot of Asian Americans around me, and it wasn't the 70s when Black people were really into him, and so for me it was like not until the 90s, the late 80s and 90s, where I see image places and you can get his T-shirt at Target, that I was like, oh, lots of people like him now, so for me, like at the time, this is ridiculous, I feel like the only Bruce Lee fan in the world.
Well, that when we talk about his iconography, and it's still obviously really relevant today, given what's going on with the protests, with the unrest, with the fight for racial equity. Hong Kong last year, there was a huge struggle for democracy against oppression, and they were using his mantra, be water, a lot, right? To kind of be agile, be mobile. And I've been reading lately that a lot of protesters here in America have been learning those same tactics from the Hong Kong protesters, which I think really says a lot about Bruce's, resonance beyond just the films, just his martial arts, but again, his iconography, his meaning. Kamau, can you talk more about like that, like Bruce as a protest figure?
I feel like when you really watch those, like the core movies, he never wants to fight. He spends a half hour of the movie not wanting to fight, like sort of like, please don't make me fight. Sort of like, can't we all just get along? Then he's like, okay, if I start fighting, I'm not going to stop fighting until the fight is won. But I'm also going to lose stuff along the way, like my personal relationships. He's either arrested or killed at the end of movies, or just sort of sitting huffing like the end of End of the Dragon, just like, like there's no victory. And so for me, I think that all aligns with social justice and with activism. Like you're never gonna, even if you win, there's another fight coming, and you're not fighting because you love to fight. You're fighting because it's the right thing to do. So to me, it aligns perfectly, and especially when you think of him coming. His breakthrough was right after like the height of the civil rights movement in America. So Black people were really caught up in conversations about how do we defend ourselves? How do we stand up for ourselves? And guns really not going to be the way for a lot of us because of guns. And so it became like, oh, you just work your body to its harshest point and become a weapon, or you just wear the shirt and feel cool. You know what I mean? Like it really aligns well with the Black people in this country.
And so you had a chance to see the film before it premieres. So, that was one of the aspects that I really wanted to focus on with Bruce, is like being in the world, being in America at the time that Bruce Lee lived. Because we sometimes, my generation, we forget that Bruce Lee had to go through a lot of struggle, that it wasn't just like Bruce Lee became this huge star immediately, that he was rejected by Hollywood because, the face of the Asian American man, with the boiling up of the Vietnam War, and then 10 years earlier, the Korean War, and then 2 decades earlier was, the end of World War II. How did someone like Bruce Lee break out of that representation of being the stereotype and be more than who society thought he could be, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely it's the pioneering story of one of the first Asians to break through media in such a difficult period of time, at a time where if when you look back at it, it's almost not impossible, but you have to really climb out of a situation that is against you. I mean, I think I remember like just the kung fu story is already crazy. Like they casted a white guy to play a Chinese guy when they could have had Bruce Lee. It's bizarre that like, like how they got away with that. And that show lasted for, I don't know how long it lasted for, but it lasted for a long enough period of time where it was okay. It was normalized. Like, hey, that's a normal thing to do. And until you go back in history and you see it, then it's like, it's shameful. But like during that time, it was like, yeah, this is how we do it. It's just, it's crazy. And you go back and that's why it's so great to have these documentaries that really kind of tell the behind the scenes stories. Because whenever we think of Bruce Lee, whenever we think of the people that we look up to, we see the glory, we see the wins, we see the what we are excited to see, the inspiration behind it, but you don't see the struggle so much, and it also resonates to what's going on today too, to really showcase the struggle, really showcase the hardships, and exactly what I love what you're saying too, about the synergy of the fight of social justice and activism and like Bruce Lee's stories. I was like, we don't want to fight, but it's not like we want to be out there fighting, but we have no choice. We have to fight for the greater good, and even at the end we're still like huffing, we're still like there's another fight to be had. There's more justice that we need to deal with, that we need to fight for. It's like showing that side is beautiful.
I think like one of the things I learned making this film, it's been like 5 years in the making actually, is that we always think of Bruce Lee as this teacher, right? He's a teacher of his philosophy, teacher of Jeet Kune Do, teacher of martial arts, but he's really such a student of everyone he interacted with. From Jesse Glover, who was a victim of police brutality. And that's one of the reasons that Jesse decided to get into self-defense and learn martial arts, right? And I think that being one of his first interactions in America, Bruce's interactions, really informed him like what it means to be an ally, what it means to like be on the right side of oppression, against oppression, and just realizing that people are going to judge you on what you look like. And you've got to be ready for that. You got to be prepared for that. So, I mean, Kamau, like, I think, the term allies is really important in today's conversation. And, for me as an Asian American, I definitely feel like I stand on the shoulders of the civil rights movement. My parents stand on those shoulders too, because we wouldn't be here. My parents were Vietnamese War refugees, and, African Americans were very much supportive of us coming over to America and becoming Americans, while a lot of Americans were against that idea. So, I think African Americans are going through so much right now. You don't need to educate me on how to be an ally, but I just want to kind of like say like how important it is that there's that interchange of ideas between different communities, so we realize that we're in this together.
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think that's why this documentary is so important, and also studying Bruce Lee's life off camera is important, because, there have been movies made, one that I can think of that I won't name, that fictionalized Bruce Lee's life off of camera with inventing a new white guy for him to be friends with and a whole bunch of nonsense that was not anything about his life. When you could make a movie about Bruce Lee, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Steve McQueen hanging out together. What
I would watch that for sure. Yeah. Let's get on that, Kamau.
All right. Once we get off this, we got music, we got a writer, we got a director. To me, like, his real life is the thing that shows he wasn't necessarily going out his way to be like, I should form alliances with the Asian American. He wasn't going out his way to say, like, I should form alliances with African Americans and Caucasian Americans and see if we can come together and settle our differences. He was like, that guy's cool. That guy's cool. And they were like, we like you. Let's hang out together. And through the process, Kareem rubs off on him. Steve McQueen hips him to showbiz, and it all sort of naturally builds. And so right now is certainly there's been some tension between the Asian American community and the Black community around like what's happening in the response of like the pandemic. And Black people are saying, we need to hear you show up, basically. In a very nice way, I want to be clear. And I feel like if you look at Bruce, it's like if you show up on an average day and we all build these alliances naturally, it's easier to show up when everything goes haywire. And so I feel like that's the lesson of Bruce is like, form friends outside of your immediate circle, form relationships, reach outside of yourself. If people have knowledge you want, become friends with them. Don't just tell them to give it to you. And so for me, it's like really important right now to look at how Bruce just sort of wandered through the world, sort of naturally going to the people who he was interested in, and also just being a seeker of knowledge generally, you know? So if we all lead our lives as seekers of knowledge, you will automatically find yourself in rooms with people who are not like you.
Totally. I think, Steve, do you want to add anything in terms of Bruce, like just going beyond representing himself as an Asian, but representing like other communities, other underrepresented communities, and having that friendship with all different types of people?
Yeah, I love that line that you said, Kamau, about when you're a seeker of knowledge, you're gonna end up becoming friends or being attracted to people that are not like you. And I think that's a big lesson of life. You know, I think one of the strongest lessons of life, and that's something that I've learned as well, is as a producer myself, I learn the most when I'm challenged the most. So whenever I work with different sounds, different cultures, different languages, and I cross those borders, and we try to do some collaborative efforts to find a way to create a whole new lane. That's when I learn the most, and that's when I'm most fulfilled. And I think that's a great lesson of life, is that, you know, our lives are meant to be explored and to explore and to enrich and to share. And that's another thing about Bruce. It's about like that ability to connect with so many people and so many cultures. And when you do that, it's you know, then you find your passions. I mean, I found my passions personally through this ability to learn how to share and connect. And you know, like Bruce Lee's art is you know, his art is like philosophy of the human experience through, you know, martial arts and things like that. But it was more philosophy of human experience. For me, it's like music is my way to connect, you know, and seeing that in Bruce Lee at a young age, this ability for Bruce to connect to so many different people naturally as well. I love how you said that too, because it's so true. It's very much like he wasn't like, oh, you're white and you're black, so I'm gonna be friends with you so we can be all diverse. It's more like, you know, it's like you're doing some cool shit over here, and you're definitely doing, you know, and like everyone's so different that like when you hang, you're just like sharing so much. And when you see something like that happen on the big screen, it's a game changer for especially young open minds, that like you have, like, of course you have to think outside the box. You have to try new things. You have to let yourself be free like that. And I mean, you know, seeing Bruce with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Steve McQueen, that image is such a powerful image in itself, and it gives you the ability to want to share, you know, with so many different people, and it lent a lot for me personally as someone that collaborates across so many different spaces of music. So it's a great conversation.
With the film, one of the ideas that I wanted to come across is that all the places that Bruce lived were really kind of multicultural, that were really diverse parts of America. Seattle, Oakland. I say Oakland, not San Francisco, because Oakland in the 1960s is very different from San Francisco, right? And then obviously growing up in Hong Kong, which fits kind of this mosaic of all different cultures, and then Los Angeles, right? And again, I think the idea of like multiculturalism, diversity, it really made Bruce into this kind of fluid figure, right? He was never rigid. It really influenced how he lived his life. And I mean, going back to that though, there's one person in the film that people will see soon. Is Amy Sambo, who's Bruce Lee's first love in America. And she's never spoken about Bruce on camera before. We were lucky enough to speak to her. And what she taught Bruce was the power of being Asian American, which, even though Bruce didn't want to be put in a hole of being Asian or American, you want to be seen as a human being. It's also important internally to have that identity, right? That strong sense of identity. And Bruce had just come from Hong Kong. He felt very Asian in America and out of place, but he had to try to assimilate to being American. And she was in an internment camp. She taught him all about Asian American history. And that's a big part of the film, because you have to kind of know where you came from in order to know where you are and where you're going, right? So, Steve, as a fellow Asian American, why is it important, I think, that people, especially an ESPN audience, and we're so grateful to have this platform. I don't think anyone's talking about Asian American history on ESPN in this type of way, that we, generations know about like the Chinese Exclusion Act, the internment camps, all the things that Asians have to go through in order to become someone that feels represented, feels whole, feels American.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about representation at this point, and I think if you go back to like yourself as a kid, when your mind is open, you're innocent from a lot of the bad stuff in the world, and you're just learning as you're going, and you understand at that point how much representation is so crucial to the steps in life that you take as you move forward. And Asians in America, we make up a large part of the culture here. We bring a lot to American culture, and we need to make sure that history is also known. We need to make sure that we represent ourselves and we put our identity forward and share that history that we've been, through the struggles that we're talking about, the Exclusion Act, to the internment camps, to the victories that we've made, by setting new roads for other Asians in America to be able to have a voice and to be able to create new businesses or create industries or and I think it all goes back to what I was saying earlier about this ability to share and connect with people. Because all the stuff that we do, all these different industries that we create, the businesses, however way we entertain people, it's because we want to connect with people. We're a species that wants to connect, and we have so much to offer, and there's so many different ways to share that, our culture, and I mean, we can just keep going on about that for sure. That's why, like, whenever I see an Asian American that's doing something profound, that's doing something exciting, that's raising their voice, that's standing up and speaking out, and I get like chills down my spine, because it gives me the power myself. It like says, hey, I could do that too. And if I didn't have like that feeling of reinforcement, that feeling of community, and not feeling alone, I don't know if I could do that. Sometimes I think in many cases, a lot of us feel alone until we hear like a fellow brother or sister out there saying something or doing something, and you're like, okay, that they're speaking for me too. I could speak for myself now. You kind of need that help up. You need that hand to like hold on to and get up. And it's a much more powerful thing than you think when you stand up, when Bruce Lee's doing his thing, he's not thinking, I'm going to inspire, all these different people. I'm just doing my thing. Like, I'm doing this naturally. Like, this is like how I move. This is how I emanate who I am. But then, there's me who's like sitting watching TV going, oh my God, like I can do that too. Maybe not like that, but in a different way, and so you have to go back to that kid and remember, as we live our lives, we can inspire people to activate themselves, to do things outside the norm, to break their own boundaries. And we go back to that kid, we can find the source of the reason why we do it. 'Cause sometimes we lose that, like as we go through our days, like when you're doing a comedy skit, when you're directing a film, when I'm like making a song, we sometimes get stuck in the process and we don't realize the power that we actually can help to inspire people.
That's amazing. I think, one of the things that, as you say, like Bruce wasn't thinking he was going to do all this, right? He was just kind of doing his job being Bruce. And he's become such a myth, such a legendary figure, almost unattainable to many people in my generation and the current generation, because we never saw him as a human being. I think, one of the things that hopefully people see in the film is I was trying to unpack that myth, because when we can be more connected, you bring up that term connection too, Steve, like we feel connected to Bruce's story as a human being, then we can truly aspire to be like him, right? We can see all his vulnerabilities. We can see his anxieties. Like, he was scared to go to America. He was an 18-year-old kid going to a whole new homeland, and not just Asians can connect to that. Like, all immigrants can connect to that. Going to somewhere you don't have any type of network relationship with and no money in your pocket. And also, he also had the fear of growing old. He didn't want to be frail. He didn't want to be seen as weak. And all these ideas just, I think, again, Bruce Lee is seen as this model of masculinity and confidence. And he's still that. But within this like kind of new model of masculinity, you can show your vulnerability. You can show your anxieties, because through that is how we can, again, aspire to be closer to these type of people. So we're going to have to wrap it up soon, but I would love to just hear any last thoughts you guys had on Bruce Lee and Bruce Lee in this moment in many ways, because we're living in really strange times, and I hope you guys are both safe and healthy. But what message from you did you learn from Bruce Lee that you hope like a ESPN audience might be able to take away?
I think that the great thing about this airing on ESPN is that I'm sure there's going to be some people watching like, he's not a sport. Bruce won any championships in the field of competitive martial arts star, but he's absolutely an athlete. He's absolutely putting his body to the same type of physical test and rigor that the highest level of athletes are doing at the professional level. And I would imagine that his training regimen, even as antiquated as it may seem now, is pretty tough for people if they tried to do it. So I would imagine that he was pushing himself. Things he did have filtered their way through sport, and he certainly inspired lots of athletes, even outside of inspiring the world. And ESPN is also home of the UFC, and the godfather of the UFC is Bruce Lee. So
absolutely.
All of that stuff, Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. It's like what we watch on TV, like the competitive nature of the UFC, anything at that level of like boxing, fighting at that competitive level. When you go to the Godfather, it's Bruce Lee, so it's like there is the lineage, and I think it's important to, going back to history, it's important to talk about the Godfathers, the place of the lineage, that the people that inspired so much, and it's still continuing to inspire.
Well, I wanted to thank you both, Steve and Kamau, for joining me today, and for appreciating Bruce Lee, watching the film, and I hope the audiences who are going to see it coming up also appreciate it, and I appreciate everyone out there. Hope everyone's staying safe and healthy. Thank you so much.